I'm going to teach you the 4 A's of transformation: awareness, acceptance, adaptation, and don't be an a-hole. I'll explain what I mean as we go forward here, because we all have these protector parts that show up to help us survive our lives, and sometimes they're a little rigid. They can be a-holes. So here's mine. I used to confess things to stay loved, and so before anybody else could find out that I've done something wrong or that I'm impure or whatever it is, I would confess it to stay clean and to stay connected. And I thought, okay, that's a good strategy. That's going to keep me going pretty well. But I had no idea why I was doing it. I was just doing it. And so I have these adapters, and they're not adaptations. They're actually survival mechanisms to keep us connected, to keep us safe, and to survive in our worlds. Not really thrive, but at least survive. And so I adapted to stay safe and not feel broken. It's not because I feel broken or I am broken. It's just I wanted to stay connected to either family or culture or whatever it was. But what I'm realizing is it was just an old pattern or an old system that I called an adaptation, and it really wasn't serving me. So one example is when I was serving a mission, I confessed some things about myself, and I was up for promotion into a position, and it cost me the position. I wasn't advanced. I wasn't able to move up in my leveling, and there was a coyote behind me. By the way, I'll post a picture here, so I'm checking my back just to be aware. But I felt like this need that I needed to confess that, to stay clean, to do all these things, and it actually cost me my advancement. And so, that wasn't ideal, but the alternative was to hide and sneak and whatever and not tell, and then I feel shame or guilt on the inside. I didn't really love that idea either. And so I grew up in a culture where we confess everything. We confess to stay clean, we confess to stay connected. And so I was taught, I learned actually that it's better to tell on yourself in advance because it hurts less and you can stay connected than to be found out. Now, another thing that I would do is that I would take ownership of things that weren't mine to clean up, and I would be over responsible. And I thought, I'm doing the right thing. I'm a good man. I'm going to take on things that aren't mine. And I thought that was an adaptation, but it wasn't. It was a survival mechanism. I was trying to stay connected, stay clean. And so that's where I think I was looking at more of my image than my actual integrity. If you look at integral, it's to hold things together. But when we look from image, we're concerned about how we look and how we stay connected to our social connections, our culture, our family, and even our closest relationships. And so I found myself confessing things ahead of time to quote unquote be in integrity, but it wasn't about integrity, it was about upholding my image. And so I want to talk about these 4 A's because the first A is awareness. If you don't know you do these things, you can't really change them. They say that the first step in transformation is awareness. The second is acceptance. So until we accept it and acknowledge it, we can't really transform it either. And so that's where I found that I was acknowledging things, but I wasn't okay with them. And so there's a little analogy I'm going to use. Imagine you got to build a foundation for a home. You get in the dirt and you find all these boulders and you think, man, why are there boulders in my dirt? I've got to build a foundation here. And you can start getting pissed off at nature. You get pissed off at God for putting these boulders here and not having the foresight that you're going to build a foundation here. And so you fight what is. You're resistant to it. I don't love that these boulders are here. I don't want them here. I'm going to fight what is. And so we spend all of our energy fighting what is. Versus adaptation, where we can look at it and say, okay, there's boulders here. I don't love it. I'm not resigning to it. But I do have to adapt to the situation. So you can curse the terrain, you can curse God, or you can adapt. So number one, you got to be aware that it's there. If I didn't know the boulders were there, I couldn't do anything about them. And if I don't accept that they're there, then I find myself fighting what is rather than looking for solutions and adapting. And then when I think I'm adapting in a conscious way, my survivors kick in and they start adapting for me. in a way that's not healthy or that's been pre-programmed that I'm not aware of. Charles Darwin said it's not survival of the fittest or the most intelligent, it's the most adaptable to change. And are you doing conscious adaptation or are you doing survival adaptation? You know, the lie that we face is that I have to adapt to this to survive. You know, I have to confess, I have to do things to stay safe. And that's just not true. But we learned as a survival mechanism to do those things so that we could stay connected, so that we could stay clean according to our own value systems, which truly weren't even our own value systems. They were handed down a lot of times. And so I can choose what I want to share. If somebody, or if I do something that affects my integrity, I can choose what I would need to share. I can clean it up without having to confess my worth. Because when I get into confessing my worth and telling on myself before things happen, then really what I'm doing is I'm adapting for survival. Because I don't want to get in trouble, and I found that it softens the blow if I can tell on myself first. And so the lie is that I have to confess so that I can stay clean and connected. And that's old programming. That's programming from my family, from religion, from society. They tell us you need to stay connected and it's worth more than your peace. So here's the thing though, your adapters might be outdated. So when we look at awareness as the first step in transformation, the second is acceptance, the third is adaptation, and number 4 that ties right in there, don't be an a-hole, is that some of these adaptations are very mean, very protective, very territorial, and they put on the appearance of coming from principle or values, but they're protectors. They're meant to help you survive. And so when you slow down and you look at it, am I being an a-hole here? And you're taking on responsibility for things that aren't yours, and you're confessing things that you don't have to confess based on old programming, you can slow down and start to do conscious adaptation, which is where you consciously rewrite the story and the pattern. You rewrite the narrative, because until you change that narrative and practice it long enough, you're not going to change. And many of us say, I don't have the brain for that. I don't have the patience to learn something new. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. What a freaking lie. Because we have neurogenesis for our whole life, from the time we're born to the time we die. We have neuroplasticity from the time we're born till the time we die, which means at any point in our lives we can learn something new. So there is no excuse here. I'm by the freeway, so it's a little loud. So it's up to you to make the conscious adaptation to stop playing off the old patterns and the routines that you've been programmed with, and start consciously choosing where you're going to go from here. And so here's a new vow and declaration that I want to make is, I don't confess to stay loved. I choose what's true. And I step out of survival and step into self-leadership, which means I'm very aware of what's there. I'm okay with what's there without resigning to it. And I'm going to adapt consciously in a way that's going to make my life even better. So here's my invitation to you. What are your adaptive patterns that are getting in the way of your progress? What boulder have you been blaming? And are you adapting with intention or just surviving? You might sit with those questions and really be with it. Where are your protectors coming from? And is it moving you in the direction you want to go, or is it keeping you stuck? That's the question to be with today. Appreciate you listening for a minute. Go make it a giant day, and I will see you in the next video.